Hello, and thank you for listening. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I have a small request. If you're enjoying the Book and Lounge podcast, please take a moment to subscribe. Your support helps us to continue to bring you engaging discussions on your favourite books. Now let's dive into today's episode.
Anyway, we're here to talk about Manchester Happened. It's a collection of short stories by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi.
And today I'm joined by Annette, Taiwo, and Katrina.
And before we get to the book, I've got one question for you guys from one of our listeners. And the question is, what football teams do you all support?
Zero.
Is zero a team?
Yeah, I don't support any football team. When I was in my late teens, I went through not quite a crisis, but this whole idea of, to be a man, you need to support a football team. Anyway, I decided to adopt a team, and I adopted Chelsea at the time because a friend of mine supported Chelsea. He's diehard Chelsea. But then I realized that I had no interest in discovering who the players were or maintaining any idea of the scores, where their position is in the league, what is a league. But I just had no interest. I'd rather just go to sleep, watch a movie, read a book, anything. Watch paint dry than watch, these overpaid men kicking a ball. I don't support any particular team.
By location, I should support Crystal Palace. But other than that, I'm not interested. I watched the World Cup. I watched that from the beginning to the end. I watched the Euros. Any sort of international competition I would watch. Other than that, I haven't a clue what's going on.
Okay, so that's a question from a listener. And I'm going to ask a random question. What's the most random name you've been called, and by whom?
By which you mean sort of repeatable names, I suppose.
Yes. Yep.
There's different variations of my name, which annoys me if people don't. The Antoinette always annoys me because you've added on a whole chunk at the beginning, which is not there. It really, really, really irritates me. And I'm not a fan of my name being shortened either. My parents shorten my name, and that's fine. When other people try to shorten my name, I don't like that. I just go by Annette. That's my preference. But the Antoinette, Auntie, Nettie, I don't like any of that. I don't like it.
So not even the Antoinette.
Auntie Nettie?
Auntie Nettie, Netto. It's just they'll just pick bits from Annette and just make it. But Antoinette is the main culprit. Like that's the number one that I get.
Is Annette then supposed to be short for Antoinette?
No, it's a name on its own.
Yeah, okay.
I just don't know why they just decide to go with Antoinette. I don't even know how to spell it.
It's the royalty thing, isn't it? It's the royalty thing. The royalty, Antoinette, isn't it?
Yeah, but no.
French royalty.
No, just like Annette. That's it. But
Yeah,
my parents
it's
call me
funny.
Annie.
Okay. And you're okay with your parents calling you Annie?
Yeah, they can call me that. It's fine. I won't protest. But anyone else that tries it, it's quite frustrating.
Okay, fair enough. So that reminds me, I was listening to Jane Eyre because I want to read Wide Sagasso Sea that was recommended by Kay. I noticed that Mr. Rochester calls Jane Janet, and it just got me thinking: is Jane short for Janet? Because I've never ever thought about it that way. But he's the only character that calls her Janet, and just like, why does he call her Janet? Anyhow, back to my question, Taiwo. Have you been called anything other than Tyler?
I mean, it's normally something like T. Close friends may call me T. I have been called Teen.
Tin.
Teen, T-I-N-G, Teen.
Oh,
Teen.
okay.
I think that was when I was being propositioned, but it kind of just went over my head.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was like, who called you that, Taiwo? Wow.
So no,
Okay.
not really.
Okay. So you've never been asked, or you've never been in a situation where people can't pronounce your name, and then they just give you a completely different name?
I have been in that situation many years ago when starting a job in local government, and they were saying, "Oh, well, we can't pronounce your name. We'll call you Ty." And so they called me Ty for quite a long time.
Did you
But
protest?
I didn't at the time. You know that situation where you're young-ish, you want to fit in, it's a new job, you just shrug your shoulders and say, okay, fine, call me Tai. But over time, I think they learned to say Tai Wo. And
well, that's what I was just thinking. You just add a whoa. What?
It's not very true, is it?
Of all the Nigerian names, this is not that bad.
But the thing is that, to be honest, I mean, I don't complain when people don't get my name right, because I myself don't pronounce it as it's accurately and perfectly pronounced. I remember going to my parents' hometown, my hometown, and the way they pronounce my name, I was just looking, is that me they're calling, you know? Because, you know, Yoruba people, not just Yoruba, these are Ijebu people, you know, real, the way they pronounce my name, I was not shocked, but surprised. I said, so all these years I've just been pronouncing it in a very, let's just say, English way.
Mm-hmm.
But now I just kind of accept that I am who I am by virtue of where I was born and where I've lived most of my life.
It's interesting what you're saying about local government, because when I first was out at work, I worked in a old-fashioned type of learning disability hospital where most people weren't English, and they always changed my name. People always want to change it to some variation of Catherine, or just say Kay because it's easier and quicker. But in my family, nobody has ever really shortened it at all. They always call me Katrina.
Okay. No, I get buzzed when people call me Jack. It just really annoys me. In this book, there are a lot of names that I couldn't pronounce, and it's embarrassing given as I'm Ugandan. But alongside the names in the book, there's also a lot of words that are not. I am actually jumping ahead here, aren't I? Because we haven't talked about what the book is or even what it's about. I'll start again. So we are discussing Manchester Happened by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. The book is a collection of short stories, and it's set in Manchester and bits in Uganda, mainly Kampala. And it's predominantly about migration. It's basically set within a community of people who have left Uganda to come to the UK. Some of them have settled in London, but the majority of them live in Manchester. And it basically traces back the migration from Uganda from the Second World War time up until the early 2000s. So that's the first half of the book, people coming to the UK. And then the second half is called Returning, which is where people who have been in the diaspora have now started returning home, either for good or just to visit. And then it just explores the dynamics between the relationship between the people who have left home to come to the UK and the people who have stayed behind. It addresses themes like, well, obviously migration, but also identity and patriarchy, cultural appropriation, surrogacy, lots of other things that we're going to be talking about. So I guess my first thing I should ask is, what did you guys think about the book? Taiwo, people can't see you. Listeners cannot see you with your hands, with your thumbs up.
Loved it.
Why?
I struggled to find a particular story that I could say this is my number one story, but on going through again, I realized that the short stories, the really short ones, like She's Our Stupid and The Nod and Malik's Door. Okay, maybe not Malik's Door, not that short, but The Nod and She's Our Stupid seem to be my favorite ones, although Malik's Door is probably my top number one favorite one. I like the whole idea of talking about people who have returned. So they've left and then they've returned, and how in leaving, they've changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the place that they've left has also changed over time, but they've changed in a particular way as a result of coming to the global north and then going back, and how they readjust to fitting back in. And I like the way she kind of gets under the skin of many of the different issues that people experience as a result of the changes in themselves and the changes that they see as a result of having been away from where maybe their people or they originated. I think she's a really good storyteller. So yeah, I loved it.
Well, I didn't love it as much as that. I appreciate the stories. I think the concepts she went over were interesting, and most of the stories were quite interesting. But as I've often said, I'm not a great fan of short stories. You've read one story and you were sort of enjoying it, and then you're suddenly thrown into another group of people, and you've got to readjust to this group of people and what's going on. But the stories are interesting, I must say.
Yeah, I think for similar reasons, I'm not a huge fan of short stories, as what Katrina said. But overall, I really loved the book for all the reasons that Tyro said. I really enjoyed memoirs of Namaso, so the dog one, and also She's Our Stupid. I really enjoyed that. But they were all great. I think, yeah, all really, really interesting just to see how people change, how people adapt when coming here, and also sometimes a surprise they find when they go back and see how things have changed there, and they're then therefore struggling to adapt when they go back. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
And I think I am with you, Taiwo, on this one. I really enjoyed the collection. I like how she's told migration from lots of different perspectives. So the reasons people actually leave, there's no one reason like you see in the media. People always think that people come, because they want to access the NHS and take our jobs and all of that. She's actually given various factors that drive people to leave home and come to the UK. And I like how she's explored that. But I also like the complicated relationship between the people that stay behind and the people that have left, and the dynamics, or how the relationship change, and also how they view each other. I also think that there was a lot of humor. There's some things that or some scenes that she was writing about that had me laughing out loud. But the having said that, she actually does explore some really serious issues. So I did find some of the stories, I guess, a bit samey. And I also think that she's a better novel writer than she's a short story writer. Having said that, I really liked, like you, Annette, the memoirs of Namaso. And let's tell this story properly. Those really, I found those really entertaining, but also very realistic. Well, the dog one wasn't very realistic, but the let's tell the story properly, that was really realistic. And I've heard many times of people talking about that happening to people that they know. I'm going to read out some statements. Then I'm going to ask you what your view is based on the statements. And we can all then, I guess, discuss. So the first one is about the nod. Taiwo, you mentioned the nod earlier on, so maybe if you just tell us a little bit about the nod. But also, but the question is, do you give the nod, and under what circumstances do you give the nod?
It's funny you asking that question, because I was walking down the street last week and I gave a nod to someone and he didn't nod back. And I felt inside that I was quite crestfallen. I just thought, brother, don't you see me? Don't you know that that's the nod? But anyway, I mean, it rarely happens where you kind of nod at someone and they don't nod back. And the funny thing is, even for like a non-Black man, maybe there's this kind of almost an unspoken interaction where maybe something is happening and I've seen that thing that's happening and he also seen that thing that's happening. We're both kind of passing by whatever is going on and we look at each other. We don't say anything, but that kind of exchange where we see this thing that's going on and we both think, oh, isn't life strange? That kind of situation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about race, but the nod is I guess it's a specific way of acknowledging a person through the prism of the color of their skin. And with this particular story, the whole idea with Teta and Lucky, I keep saying Lucy, but it's Lucky. Teta and Lucky. Lucky doesn't realize that Teta is Black. Bearing in mind that Black and white are artificial constraints, but they have real world consequences. And the real world consequence for Lucky is that Teta is offended and shows displeasure in various ways. And I think it was when she said something about our skin, And then she became even more offended when Lucky was kind of checking her out, looking her over, for signs of her blackness, And I think Teta felt, am I not black enough? It's about origins, and her not knowing her father has caused her some psychic difficulty, I would say, in some ways, which is understandable. I mean, even if she weren't a black woman or a fair-skinned black woman, I mean, any person that doesn't know their parents is likely to have maybe certain feelings of inadequacy, maybe a certain burden. Maybe it would take quite a while to come to terms with it. And I think this is what is coming out in the story.
I don't really initiate it. I will always nod back. I think it's normally in spaces where we're clearly a minority. If I'm just walking down the street, I don't really feel the need to do the nods. I'll be nodding like every other person. I don't. I'm wondering what circumstances in which you had to nod, Taiwo, or where you were. But yeah, I normally, if I'm on holiday, if I'm somewhere where there's not a lot of black people, and then I see like a group, I think we'll just naturally nod at each other. And sometimes in the workplace, sometimes.
Whereas I find that every time I go outside London, definitely people will nod, and sometimes it just takes me by surprise because I'm not used to it. Living in London, barely anybody nods anyway. Yeah. But if I go outside London, people nod, I'm like, the first few times I'm kind of like, oh, okay. And then I remember that actually this is why they're nodding, because there's not that many of us, and they're telling me that they've got my back should things kick off, so that's fine.
And then like I don't play it cool because I'm not used to it. I get a bit giddy as I'll calm down. Like I need to just be like, oh yeah, no, I do this all the time. And because sometimes I'm like, enthusiastically like smiling. I need to just because I'm just not used to doing it. But yeah, same outside of London, or if I'm abroad somewhere where there just aren't a lot of black people, then fine. But other than that, I don't really do it.
I remember I was walking down the street in Beijing, and I was walking with a Spanish friend, and this black guy was walking towards us, and then when he got to us, he nodded and smiled, and then carried on in his way. And my Spanish friend turned around to me and was like, "Do you know him?" Because she just never, for her, it's just not a thing.
Yeah.
Katrina, the nod.
Yeah, well, I can tell two stories about this from my own point of view. Go back to when I was a child. If we were abroad, if there were any English people coming, my parents would always immediately stop talking so that they wouldn't know we were English, because English people abroad are so embarrassing. We did not wish to be recognised at all. And I've always maintained that. So when I was living in Tanzania, I will not go to these expat things because God knows what sort of people go to them. You just sort of fear. But on the other side of it, because I've often walked down the road with black people, I'm quite aware of this nod thing. I find it a bit disorientating because I'm used to it when I'm with a black person and I walk with them and, you sort of smile or something and, when they're nodding at each other. And then when you're on your own as a white person, you sort of, oh, okay, well, I'll just walk past. It's a weird sort of situation. Because of how I feel about it as a white English person with other white English people, so I relate it to racism, that people need to have that solidarity to support one another. Expat people need that solidarity and they need to feel less of a minority. But I don't feel like that. I feel like if I'm in a different country, that's because I should make more effort to be integrating myself with that different country. But then, of course, if you've got the racism thing to deal with, it distorts that.
It's, I find it funny that you guys stopped speaking because.
No, my parents would start speaking French or something to try to make sure that we weren't mixed up with. You know how embarrassing some English tourists could be, especially we didn't go on holiday to mix with them. We went on holiday to.
You're running away from them.
Something different.
Right. So Taiwo, you want to say something?
I wanted to say that from what the three of you have said about the nod, it made me realise that there may be a gendered element to it, which I hadn't thought about before. because both yourself, Jackie, and Annette mentioned the fact that in London, because non-Black people are not so much of a minority in numbers, that there's no recall to kind of nod. But for me, that doesn't really apply. I don't really go out of London that much, and yet I find that the nod happens at least within a fortnight. It's just that I see you kind of thing, and I do it to people, they reciprocate, which is why it was funny when I did it to someone and he kind of, either maybe he'd missed it or he blanked me or whatever, which had never happened before, which is why I mentioned it.
Yeah.
But I never realized that there might be a gendered element to it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I'd never really thought about it that way either. And having said that, yesterday I went, this thing about being, I guess, ignored. Yesterday I went on a hike and I was no, I wasn't. The first time I went, I was the only Black person there. And then yesterday there was another Black lady there. But at no point did we make any effort, either of us, to try to talk to each other. When I got home, I did ask myself, so why did I not say hi or anything?
It wasn't as if the two of you were studiously avoiding each other, was it?
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I didn't. I don't think I was avoiding her.
It's just that maybe your paths didn't cross naturally, as such, and you didn't force the issue. Whereas you saw the woman, because she's Black and you're Black, you then rush up to her or you find a way to connect with her.
I don't know. I was just curious as to, I guess, why. There was 16 people altogether, and I think I spoke to at least half of them. And yeah, I just found myself thinking, okay, so how come I didn't speak to her? But having said that, she came with her friend, and most of the time she was talking to her friend.
I find that quite interesting what you're saying, because if I was with a group that was predominantly or completely among Black people, and then a white person turns up, I find it quite irritating if people expect I'm meant to pair off with that person. I feel, why should I just, why should I have something in common with them? I don't see it.
That's what I was saying. I feel like in the back of my mind, it would be like, oh, well, everyone's expecting me to talk to them because they're Black. And so I don't know if that, I don't know, there is just that expectation as well, which is quite frustrating because you don't have to. Yeah.
I don't feel too bad then. Okay, moving on. So the book starts off with a young guy who runs away from home to join the British Army. And so that's the first bit of migration that we see. And then it just continues into the 70s, 80s, 90s, and noughties. So the treatment of immigrants, or migrants, as I like to call them, has changed little over the last century. What do you guys think?
You could say that about almost anything, though, couldn't you? In the kind of very broadest statement of the fact that, I mean, people are people. People have always been people. Some people are good or will behave in a good way, and some people not so much. I mean,
so you don't feel that there's no difference or progress or turning back at all in the last 100 years or so? Well, I'd like to think that there has been, because I mean, previously you had those signs on the door saying no Irish, no Blacks, no dogs. So I think we've moved on from that. And previously,
you find a way to do it, Jackie, without doing that. If that makes sense. Like, if they had the ways of what we have now, I'm sure they would have done it then. I don't know. Even on like spare room and stuff, I've seen years ago when I was looking for a house share, someone was just blatantly would say like no Sri Lankans. Like, they'll just say it. And I was
really,
like, is
they
that
actually
allowed?
said that in the advert, because that's not allowed.
I know. So
they must have had a really bad experience with Sri Lankans,
Yeah, but like to just say it is just, So
I guess what you're saying, Annette, is just much more subtle nowadays. It's not as obvious and in your face. That reminds me, like when I used to work at one of, I won't say the name of the company, they used to have a sign up in the kitchen saying you were not allowed to bring smelly food to warm up in the microwave. And you know, when they say that, who they actually mean by putting that up.
But the word smelly is so subjective, though, isn't it? I mean, most
Exactly.
food smells to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming you're not bringing in a jackfruit or something that really pongs, you know?
A jackfruit doesn't smell.
It's the durian, I think, maybe.
Oh, is it that?
Yeah,
One?
durian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Sorry, you were saying, Taiwo?
Yeah, as long as you're not bringing in something that is, you know, really pungent. I would have thought that. But then again, people in the global south tend to use more spices stereotypically than maybe people in the global north. So maybe what they need to say is, you know, no peppers, no garlic.
No onion.
Very specific.
The guy in our allies, the colony, the guy that was, what was he cooking? Cow foot or something, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
That one for work is a bit much, Taiwo, to be honest.
Come on, Annette, have you never worked in places?
I don't care. Okay, no.
Annette, have you never worked in places where you've seen a group of Nigerian women warming their jollof, and it's just stinking out the whole kitchen with just jollof smell?
I happily been in a room of jollof smell, to be honest, so that's fine for me.
Well, I guess you guys think that there hasn't been that much change. I think there's been progress. I mean, fair enough. There's still a long way to go. But I feel that the fact that I can get up and go to the office, and if someone spits at me on the train, I can report them to the police, and then the police will come running and actually arrest them. I think it's huge progress, because I think before it was the police that would be spitting on you and nobody would do anything about it. So I think there's been progress, maybe not as much as we would want, and maybe racism and bad treatment, it still exists underground. But at least for me, I say it's not in my face, and it's not as bad as people who came before me faced.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it's definitely morphed, whether it's more or less, but it's definitely changed. But what flashed into my mind when you first spoke about which story you were thinking about, this man, our allies, the colonies.
In the colonies, yeah.
And which I thought was particularly sad, because it was so obvious how it was all going to go so terribly wrong, as he's gone to try to get his child back from some institution. What flashed into my mind is how the people who come into this country and who are living here but not born here, I think they've probably just got much better at managing the system, because he was just so naive about it. This is going back in the 50s, isn't it? And he just struck me as so naive, and it was so sad, because he obviously had no idea of how it was all going to work out. Whereas I think now you wouldn't get people are much more aware of how the systems work, so they can negotiate better. I'm not sure that the overall thing has really, it's improved in some ways, like you say, Jackie, but I would say it's morphed more than it's truly improved.
You know what? I didn't think I was going to be the most optimistic of people when it came to this question. So, gosh, yeah, maybe I'm living in.
No, I just think I find it so disappointing that, over my lifetime, because I've seen this through quite a few years now, and although we've never, myself and my immediate associates and family, we've never really had any issues, any really bad things happen or any issues, but you know what goes on in the world as a whole. And I just think I expected things to have changed a lot more, whereas we seem to have improved a bit, and now we're regressing again. It's very disappointing.
And talking about things changing and regressing, I'll read out my next statement. So it's, in some cultures, no matter how successful you are as a woman, you should always know your place. The male is the head of the family.
We haven't got enough time to discuss such a question.
You agree then, Taiwo, being the male?
Well, I just feel that, it's not just about culture, is it? That kind of statement. A lot of it has to do with religion and the way in which religion has been tied into the patriarchy, that situation. But going back to the previous question, the first thought that came into my mind was the enslavement of people by other people, and how, as Katrina was saying, these things morph. Slavery has never gone away. Slavery has been in the world from time immemorial. And just because most companies in the UK have their anti-trafficking or anti-slavery statements on their websites and all the rest of the, but people are just still people. So the whole need to integrate, because, our allies, the colony, what was the guy's name? I wrote it down because it just, that
Albert,
Ugandan,
did you not change it to Albert Baker or Stanley Baker or something Baker?
Abbey or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Abbey Baker, Westminster Abbey and Baker Street. But before he was Abbey Baker, he was Abu Bakri, because he changed his name because he was in, I think it was a Muslim country or Muslim part
Mombasa,
of the
something
world.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
and
was.
he wanted to get a job and he wanted to fit in. But even before that, I think that the name his grandfather given him was Suna Junju. And so, from Suna Junju to Abu Bakri to Abbey Baker, it's a lot of twisting and contorting, a lot of morphing, in the same way that progress, 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards, is so slow. It's so slow. Yeah, maybe certain things are outlawed, but you can't really legislate against people just being bad.
Yeah, I agree with Tyra. I think the example you gave, Jackie, about how a policeman couldn't spit on you now, that's just because there's laws. If they really wanted to do it and they knew there were no cameras around, they would still do it. Things obviously have to move with the times. Police have to be held account to if they do something wrong. But that's, I guess, well, not for every country, but that's just a natural progression of how society will move forward. But ultimately, if a policeman wanted to spit at you, they would. They can. It's just they know they're going to get in trouble. So that's why I still think it's still the same. It's just morphed a bit. That's all.
So I guess none of you want to talk about the man being the head of the family.
I'll speak to my inalienable right as I'm the only man on the panel at the moment. There's considerable responsibility, Heavy lies the head that wears the crown and all that kind of stuff that people say.
Yeah, crap, as you yourself have said it. because I think the story, and the story that I had in mind when I came up with that statement is, well, there's two. There's the one, let's tell the story properly, where she ends up losing her house anyway. And then there's the pastor who has the affair. Yeah, and the wedding, and how this little brother somehow is the one that's supposed to be negotiating for her. And that just really, really irritated me, the whole scenario. I know some of it was just for show, but the fact that, because he's the male, he has to be the one that's representing, although the girls are much older than he is. If he was an uncle or an older uncle, I would not have minded so much. But I think, yeah, for me, it just shows that there's still always this focus on, because he's the boy, he has to be somehow given priority, or it just annoyed me. And it just showed to me that, yes, you can make as much money as you want, you can build your house, you can do this, that, and the other, and still society, because of the way it's set up, is going to bring you down because you're a woman. So yeah, that's my rant over.
But the problem is the story wouldn't have worked if that boy, Bwemage, had been born a girl. And the fact that even though his mother was Chinese and he looks half Chinese, half Ugandan, his, is it Luganda, the language? It was
Luganda,
perfect. Yeah. And it had to be perfect for the story to flow in the way that it did, which is why I didn't particularly enjoy the story, because it seemed to me stretching credibility a little bit too far, a bit like Love Made in Manchester, stretching it a little bit too far for me anyway. But maybe it would be good, as a little kind of Nollywood film or something on Netflix, it would work. But as a
I
short
don't know
story,
that. I don't know whether or not it was stretching the narrative a bit too far, because I actually think that can happen. For me, that was very realistic. There are lots of foreigners in Uganda who speak Luganda much better than I can, and understand it much better. In fact, speak with the accent. So if this boy has grown up in Uganda and has been brought up in Uganda, it would not surprise me that his Luganda would have been just as good as any other Ugandan. And also the fact that he's male, it would not surprise me that that's how he's treated, because he's male.
I'm not.
But what? Because I thought he was meant to be fairly young, and it wasn't the fact that he could speak the language so well and all that that surprised me. It's just he seemed to have such a he just managed
Poise
the
and
whole
confidence.
situation so well, and he played
Yeah.
the whole thing off so well that struck me as he was a particularly self-possessed and smart young man. Perhaps he was, but I thought he was a little bit young to do that as well as he did. But I like that story. I found it quite amusing.
It goes back to what you were saying, wasn't it, in terms of the whole issue of the patriarchy and the fact that he's so young and yet he's given so much power, responsibility, authority and control over people that are more than twice his age, simply because of his gender, and they all kind of fall in line.
In the context of that story, though, that didn't bother me, because what I find in the amongst the Shona people, I may have got some of this wrong, but it seems like you get jobs allocated to you according to, yes, gender, but your relationship in the family, whether you're the daughter-in-law, the son-in-law, the nephew, whatever it is, you get certain jobs given to you in particular circumstances. It doesn't matter whether you're good at them or bad at them. That's your job, because that's what happens. It's the first nephew has to do X, and this is our senior son-in-law, and so he's in charge of something else when you've got a big family get together for certain issues. So I just took it like that.
Okay, so I'll move on then to the next question. People should be given a choice to decide whether or not they want to be circumcised.
You're talking about male people or female people?
Both. So circumcision sometimes takes place when people are older, and some people do get the option to choose. But in most circumstances, it's basically the child is very young, and then the parents decide, and then they circumcise the child. So this is coming from the final story in the book, where this young teenager who's mixed race decides to, go to Uganda and get himself circumcised. And yeah, so I guess the question is driven from that. So do you think that people should be, we should be giving everybody the choice to decide for themselves? Because the brother in that story decides that actually he doesn't want anything to do with it. Taiwo, why are you shaking your head? People cannot see you shaking your head.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree. I feel that when it comes to things like male circumcision, I can't speak for female circumcision, but for male circumcision, I think that if your parents want to do it, they should do it. And if you don't want to do it, then yeah, you have the choice to do it or not as an older man. But I feel that, like many things in life, when you are under the authority of a parent, it's the responsibility of the parent to do or not do, because they're your parent. I don't feel that they have to wait until you're older and then say, do you want to be circumcised or do you not? If they want to circumcise you and you're their child, you're their son, and that's what they do, then they should feel free to go ahead and do it.
Fair point. Anyone care to disagree?
No, I agree with Tyra completely. Just in respect to men, not women. I agree. It's like my ears. I didn't ask my ears to be pierced. It's not the same thing. But it's one of those things. It was just done at very, very young. Like, to be honest, they're a bit wonky. And I feel that's because my ears I wasn't given time for me to grow into them. But it's just one of those things. That was what was decided. And then that was it. I'm probably glad that I've got them done now, as opposed to now. Because since having more piercings, I don't have a very good pain threshold. So it's probably for the best. But yeah, I completely agree with Tyra. Completely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with Taiwo really, because for men it's an easier operation when they're for a small child, and it's generally thought to be a fairly healthy thing to do. Sometimes people have to have it done when they're grown because of infections and so on. So I would say yes, it's fine. Of course, it's a completely different story for female circumcision, isn't it? Because of it's just such a much more drastic operation and with so many more implications.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm not quite sure that even when you're much older, if you opt into it, whether you really have a proper informed choice.
You mean as a female?
Yes, as a female, because I know somebody who said they were all up for it because, it was parties and all the rest of it, and they were willing to go along with it. And then he said, by some good luck, really, she read a book about it and sort of understood a lot more and refused, and caused quite a lot of family problems.
So I understand the distinction between the male and the female, because with the female, as far as I understand it, is more about the control of the woman. But again, hey, if somebody wants to go ahead with it, it's their choice. As long as it's an informed decision. Most of the time it's not. In that story where we had the circumcision, there was a lot of media involved, and then you had all these various groups, piling in with their opinions, and there was a kind of like an element of cultural appropriation going on in the story. I don't know if you guys saw anything like that or thought about cultural appropriation and who should have a say in what should and shouldn't happen. Because you had the liberals carrying on about how this was barbaric and he shouldn't have it done, and then he's raising all this money, taking advantage of people in Uganda. You had to wear all those traditional outfits, he had to do all the dances, and so there was also accusations that he was basically taking advantage of the culture of the tribe. I don't know if that came across for you guys. And I guess what I'm getting at is who gets to say what is cultural appropriation and what is not, and what you as a person should do and shouldn't do.
It was interesting, wasn't it? I liked the way in which she really expanded upon the idea of the commercialization of tradition, because it made me think more recently of Brooklyn Beckham and all that's been going on with him.
See, I don't know that story, Taiwo. Please enlighten me.
Well, I don't know the story in detail, but as I understand it, he's trying to move away from brand Beckham to some extent. And I think there's been a certain element of you should be grateful that you are wealthy or the son of a wealthy couple, etc., etc. But reading some of the comments on the news in the newspapers, I realized that one of the things I think that his parents had anticipated didn't come to pass, as in they're wealthy. I think the brand Beckham, they estimate that their wealth is about $500 million, which they probably can't spend in a lifetime. But he married into a very wealthy family. They're multi-billionaires, apparently. And I think, according to what some of the commentators were saying, that there's an expectation that when he gets married, he'll need to do a prenup because he'd be marrying someone that is not as wealthy as him. But it was the other way around, because he's marrying a girl whose parents are mega wealthy, much wealthier than the Beckhams. And she was the one that was being advised that she needs to do the prenup to prevent wealth falling into his lap, that kind of thing. So it's just that whole idea of, how things can change. They were talking about the fact that his life had been commodified before he had the ability to consent, before he was born. When Victoria had a pregnancy bump, she was selling pictures of the pregnancy bump, and then when he was born, they were selling pictures of him as a baby. So the whole thing about, you need to appear when Brand Beckham is at the front row of a catwalk show and doing some presentation here and there and everywhere. You need to fall in line, because this is how we keep the brand going, and this is how we keep the interest of the general public, and this is how we monetize and make a lot of money. And
is he against brand back? Is he against being commoditized?
I think he's trying to move away from being commoditized. I mean, there was a time, obviously, as a youngster, he knew no other because he was born into it. And even before he was born, he was already being commercialized. But he's become an adult now. He's a married man. And he's seen, I think, according to some of the comments, they're saying that he's seen a different way of handling wealth because of the wealth of his wife and the fact that although they're mega wealthy, they don't have to sell their soul. But their wealth has come from a different source, and so they don't need to. He wants to move away, and apparently Brand Beckham doesn't really want him to break rank, and that's where the whole schism has come about. So the whole idea of the commercialization of the self or of the family with that Love It Made in Manchester. I mean, when I read it, I thought, is this realistic? But then I started thinking, well, I'm not of that generation where you monetize everything and everything goes on YouTube or, you know, gets uploaded, because if it isn't uploaded, it didn't happen. So it was just interested the intersection of the commercialization and monetization of a circumcision ceremony. It's like modernity clashing with the traditional culture of circumcision of a boy. It was just interesting to read.
You've kind of reminded me of the Senegalese guy. I can't tell you his name. The guy that was living in Italy and was making TikTok videos and then became really famous overnight. Let me find the story. He sold his rights.
I know the guy you're talking about, but I can't remember his name. He's a very funny looking guy and he makes funny expressions, but he's very popular.
He sold his rights to, I think, a Chinese company to use basically for anything. And I think he sold it for $1 billion. And they can do whatever they want. They can create videos in his voice, in his image. And
I thought he doesn't speak.
Sorry?
Does he not speak? Well, he does speak now. I thought he was like quiet. I can't remember his thing. I thought his thing was that he doesn't speak.
Is that his thing? I don't know.
Yeah,
Kabilame?
Yeah, I thought he just doesn't speak.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, ignore me. I just see things and he just
but I think I guess the point is that they can do whatever they want with it. So if they want to make him speak, they'll make him speak. So yeah, he says that basically sold it for 900 million.
Wow.
But that reminds me of what you were saying, Taiwo, this idea that we now live in a world where basically everything is commercialized. My question is then, are people being taken advantage of in that situation where he himself is choosing to actually sell it? And where do we draw the line? Should we draw the line?
But the fact that you said that he sold it for close to $1 million.
$1 billion.
Billion.
900 million, yeah.
Or 900 million.
Yeah.
It made me think, in the same way that Annette said, wow, it made me think, well, that's a lot of money. Although I don't know how much he gets because of tax and, you know, your legal fees and all the miscellaneous, you know, agency and everything that goes on. You still get a considerable amount.
900 million is a lot.
It's a lot of money, but it also immediately raises the question of how much are they making that they can afford to pay you that much? How much do they propose that they're going to make? They're going to make a multitude, you know, multiple times that themselves.
Well, apparently the company that bought it is called Rich Sparkles. Their stock shares on the stock market skyrocketed by 650%. So it just goes to show how much they're making from using him just by buying his rights, his image rights. Interesting. That brings me to the question of wealth. So some of the characters that were in the stories were relatively wealthy in Uganda, but when they came here, I think one of the characters made the statement that Britain is a great leveler. So basically showing that it doesn't matter what class you are back home. When you arrive here, you're all in the same boat. You're all at the bottom of the pile. I wonder why class doesn't transfer when migrants come here, or does it just transfer in?
Nobody cares that much. You could say you were a princess. I don't know what it is. I just don't think anyone cares. It doesn't matter. I'm not, so I don't care if you are. And they're gonna think, well, I'm still better than you because you've had to. If you were so high and mighty, wherever you came from, why are you here doing my job? So yeah.
Okay, there may be reasons as to why I've escaped. So, for example, if I'm saying I'm escaping Uganda, I could have escaped because my family is member of the what's the word, the opposition, right? So, although I may come from a very wealthy family, because they're a member of the opposition, I have to leave the country, right? And I come here with my doctorate. I am treated as less than compared to someone who's got their degree here, regardless of what it is that I was doing when I was back home. I could have been heading a university, for example, but because my qualifications are seen as less than, that is not recognized. And I guess the other thing is, in that instance, it depends how much my family, I guess, have stolen and where they put their wealth. Right?
I was just saying, where's the money? That's the other thing.
Yeah, if they've managed to get the wealth outside of the country, then of course I can come here and live like a princess. It doesn't mean that when I'm walking down the street, some people are not just going to be seeing me as any other Black person. It doesn't mean that. No matter what I wear, I'll still be considered a Black person and be treated in exactly the same way as another Black person. When you're here as a Black person, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You still be treated the same as the next Black person who doesn't have any money.
When you say this, you remind me of an incident that happened when it was in a residential home, and the people, I can't remember what the argument was about, but it was between some of the domestic staff who happened to be from Nigeria. And this Nigerian lady, she was getting cross, and she said, well, we were all kings and queens back in our own countries. And I just, whenever you're saying this, it makes me laugh because we always hear this. Exactly.
Yeah, well, and when you get here, you're all the same. It doesn't matter whether you're a king, or whether or not you were in a shop.
Like you say, if you manage to take enough money with you, you won't be working as a National Health Service domestic, I suppose. But if you didn't get your money out, you may well be.
Yeah, and also depends how well you invest your money, because that money does run out at some point. So then, do you think that it's better to return home with nothing, but where somebody at least knows your name? Or do you think it's better to remain here and live in a situation where nobody wants to learn your name?
Maybe it depends upon the kind of person you are, because when you said about does class, or why is it that class doesn't transfer, it doesn't, but it also does. Because that scene, remember, in Coming to America, where the king, or rather the prince, Eddie Murphy, he's recognized I think he's walking through a stadium or something like that, and he's recognized by one of his subjects, and the person is so excited and says, I have to take a selfie. No one will believe that, I've met the prince. Now, most people around don't know who the prince is, but this Black man working in the stadium knows who he is and wants to take a selfie. So it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? With class.
Yeah, but in that instance, Americans are just treating him like any other Black person, aren't they?
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. It does and it doesn't. You're a minority in the majority populace where you've moved to in the global north, and so they may not recognize your class, caste, your wealth, your background. But within your community, within that global majority area that you're living, you'll still be recognized, won't you?
Does it do you good?
It can do. I mean, there are a lot of wealthy Africans, Asians, wealthy people in general who send their kids to some of these top-notch boarding schools in the United Kingdom.
But I think, Taiwo, that situation's different. That's a situation where someone has stayed back home. They're still wealthy. They've stayed back home. They're sending their child to study, and chances that child is either going to go back home or is going to, through some connection that they have, be given a job in somewhere like JP Morgan, right? However, within JP Morgan, if you go into a meeting, you're still going to be treated the same way they treat any other Asian or any other black person, aren't you?
But how are they going to treat a black person in something like JP Morgan, though? I mean, because sometimes
like you're the cleaner, like you walk into the room and sometimes they'll assume that you're the cleaner.
Yeah, maybe they will. But some of the investors in JP Morgan are people that look like the cleaner. It's not.
Yeah, exactly that. But the chances are of anybody ever mistaking a white person for a cleaner are lower than if I was walking down JP Morgan with my locks, right? And I'm wearing, I don't know, jeans and a t-shirt, I'm 90% more likely to be considered a cleaner than a white person wearing the same outfit. Because I'm black, that's it. If I now open my mouth, they may start thinking a bit differently if I went to a public school. Public school or private school? Which one is it? I can't even.
You pay private fees for. I wrote the quote from Something Inside So Strong. It says, being in Britain is the proverbial prostituting. You know you came to work, so why get in bed with knickers on? And it just made me laugh. Kuna working so many hours, you know?
Yeah.
That she's using painkillers and 2 cans of Red Bull and Pro Plus just to stay awake and stay focused. But she's making progress.
But she's making progress. So she's building house back home and she's sending money to her mother, which most people in the diaspora do. So and that leads me to actually something that I completely forgot that I wanted to ask. So the relatives back home.
But remember, she's sending money to her mother because her mother is raising her children.
Exactly. Yes. Sometimes, yes, we do that. And the money doesn't necessarily go to raising our children because family members misappropriate it and use it to build their own houses or their own homes, as we see. I think was it the first story? No, not the first one. Well, one of the stories anyway.
Let's tell this story properly.
Yeah, well, there's an element of that there, but then it was the guy that had come here to study in the 60s and didn't go back home 10 years because obviously he couldn't, because he didn't have the right visa and he would probably not be allowed back. And then he was sending money to his wife, and the wife had to catch up with the lawyer. Is that the one that Manchester happened? Yeah. So to family and relatives back home, there are people in the diaspora are just cash cows. Discuss.
One word answer: yes.
And by that token, you get the worst of both worlds, then, don't you? You're here being leveled in the diaspora, and back home you're just being there to send money back. So, is it a good thing? Is it a good thing?
So
that's what I loved about the aftertaste of success, and which is why, in some ways, it replaced my number one story. From Malik's Door, I've now gone to the aftertaste of success as my number one story, because the poignancy of the fact that, you know, her son has been lost to her, although her son is a successful airline pilot, long haul, earning good money. His marriage has broken down. He's had this.
He was not married. He was married
to the white woman.
Oh yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yes. Sorry, I forgot about that.
So he's living this kind of bachelor existence. He's got the bachelor pad and every gadget you can think of, moving from girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend.
Yeah.
But his mother really just wants him to come back. But that's not going to happen because the mother's influence contributed to the breakdown of his marriage to his white wife.
Yeah.
But the daughter who has been raised by the grandmother, and the way in which the grandmother, her story, the backstory of the grandmother, I just found it so fascinating. And then the way in which the daughter had that relationship with a very good male friend, and whether that's going to bring relief to the grandparents of the male friend. I just found the story on so many different levels. It's so nuanced, it's so interesting. And the fact that the whole thing of artificial insemination, they were ahead of the curve, they had money, they made money. And the gossiping amongst the community about how she made her money, that kind of jealousy, you know, why can't they accept that this was a hardworking woman?
Yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier on about patriarchy. And if she had been a man, she'd have been treated very differently.
Well, that's interesting you say that, though, because I'm just thinking about this idea of leveling. It seems to me, in some traditions anyway, if your wealth gets too out of step with everybody else's, then that in itself causes problems, because it was never just by your hard work, was it? You've always
Yeah.
done something, which
Especially if you're a woman.
I know of it in the context of men. I'm sure you're right. It will be even worse. There's this sort of feeling that somehow if you've become wealthy, you must have done it by some terrible method.
So then, do you think it's better to be home where everybody knows you and enjoy your wealth if you have wealth? Or is it better to be here with all the comforts that you have, comforts in inverted commas, and people not be able to pronounce your name? Tyler?
I feel it just depends on who you are and your personality and the kind of life that brings satisfaction to you. Because for some people, I mean, some people would argue the typical Nigerian wants to be, someone to someone to carry his case for him, to be met at the airport, and someone to carry his suitcase and call him sir, and to drive him from A to B, and to fill in forms as if to say he didn't go to university, but he just can't be bothered. So basically, to do for him, because it makes him feel important. It flatters his ego. Call him daddy, chief daddy. But
Oga at the top.
my lord. But if you're not into that, if you're into either working a job or you're just into living a quiet life, you don't want to be recognized on the street. I mean, this is part of the problem, isn't it? Why someone like the former Prince Andrew cannot, he cannot do a job, and he cannot, you cannot kind of see him going and buying a loaf of bread and a pint of milk in the local Sainsbury's. These are things that, if you saw him, people will be whipping out their smartphones and taking photographs. The next thing it's uploaded somewhere, and people are slagging him off. Call yourself a former prince or call yourself a whatever, a royal. Why are you here with us?
Too right. He brought it upon himself. I'm sorry. I have absolutely no sympathy whatsoever.
I'm neither sympathizing nor not sympathizing. I'm simply saying that it is difficult when you are living a certain kind of life, which is why, someone like him and Fergie need to live, or they felt they needed to live, in a 30-bedroom mansion. Why do you need, that's a mansion. That's a like, why do you need 30 rooms, just the two of you? Why do you need 30 bedrooms, just the two of you? How much will that cost? You have that kind of mentality of not just the privilege, but that, what's the word?
Greed?
Entitlement. Entitlement mentality. You can't live like a normal person because you believe that you're not like the great unwashed. You're not like those people, the little people. You're a big person. And it causes...
It's what you're used to, isn't it, as well? It's what you're used to. If you've always lived in a 30-plus bedroom mansion, it's just what you're used to.
But you can grow
For
used
me,
to
that's
most
extraordinary.
things, can't you? You can grow
Yes,
used
of course.
to most things.
Yes, but a neighbour of mine who is, as it happens, African, Zimbabwean, in fact, is shocked that I live in a 3-bedroomed house on my own. She says, you're rattling around in it, you're all by yourself in there, whereas I find it very comfortable. So I mean, I'm not excusing Fergie and Andrew, it seems to me ridiculous, but you do get used to a certain level of something. And
you can also get unused to it.
Yes, it's true. You can, of course you can. And
so like the grandparents, isn't it? The grandparents in the aftertaste of success.
Yeah,
they're used to rattling around in their big house on their own, but they want to be used to having a grandchild
and family around them. That's the one thing that I felt bad for them about, the fact that they have all this wealth, but no one to leave it to, and no family around them to look after them in their old age. That was actually quite sad, and it made me think about the people that leave and how migration impacts them. So your identity issues, your racism that you suffer, and your feeling just out of place with the culture of the place that you've moved to. So that's the people that leave. But the people that stay behind, it's the breakup of family. not being able to see your grandchildren because they've grown up not understanding the culture, or not even knowing who you are, because chances the parents didn't have a visa to go back, and then you're not granted the visa to actually go and visit them. So it just splits up families. And the pull factors for leaving, for me, if you're in a situation where you actually have a reasonable quality of life, sometimes I think that the pull factors to leave do not outweigh the factors that you should remain. But then I'm saying that from a privileged position.
I think it's just people are all different. And some people like to stay in the place where they grew up and they know everybody. And if you've got a decent enough standard of living and you're happy with that, great. But a lot of people will still like to see something different, even if they've got enough money. They'll still think there's something interesting over the horizon. And those
But you go on
people, if they
holiday.
don't, if you can afford that, that's great. You can do it that way, and then you can always go home. But some people, if they stay where they are, they've got enough, but they haven't got enough for, like you're saying, holidaying. Some will be happy, and others will always regret they didn't try and do that, get somewhere else. And then on the other side of it, there'll be the people who moved. Some of them will be okay with it because it always changes you, doesn't it? It changes you. You're never going to be exactly the same. You might be out of place where you live, but if you go back to where you came from, you might not find you fit in 100% again either. So you're always changed by that move. And for some people, that's okay. They can take it as they can take it and they can enjoy it. Other people will always regret it and say they shouldn't have come. I just think it goes down to individuals and how they handle the problems of life, really.
There's that part in Our Allies, the Colonies, where Quay is talking to Abby and says, Moss Side is a cruel mistress, Pa. You know you have a home to go back to, but she treats you so right, you keep saying tomorrow. It's almost being trapped, whether it's trapped because you need to raise the funds so that when you go back, you're not considered a failure. You have the funds which you can use as a foundation to set yourself up and be comfortable, or, the comforts of being in the global north entrap you and you never go back.
And most of the time, actually, it's not as comfortable as people think. The Manchester Happen story illustrates that, where the girl turns up thinking that, I'm now in Britain, I'm going to be wearing designer clothes and all sorts. It's actually not as comfortable. And the amount of hours that you work, you probably wouldn't have to work the same hours if you were back home.
I agree, but you might need the connections to get the job, by the time you finish your university and all the rest of it back home. Whereas in the global north, it might simply be a case of you get a job. It may not be according to the qualifications that you have, but because of the exchange rate, you're able to save money and send money back home.
Who can save money nowadays, Taiwo? Who can save money with the cost of living and rents and everything?
People can always save money. It just depends on your lifestyle. People can always
exactly.
Save money.
And you could be living a much better lifestyle if you actually stayed at home with less money.
Yeah, there's an
basis is. Go on, Annette.
But there's an influencer that I follow. She's like a natural hair influencer. She came and studied here from Nigeria, graduated, and she said, I think she must have some sort of tracker. She's applied for over 3,000 jobs, so she said, and out of that, she's probably had about 20 interviews, and it hasn't worked out. And so after years of trying, or how long it would have taken, she's going back to Nigeria. She's just like, what? I don't know what she's got her degree in, but it seems like she'd rather not do anything else. I mean, she came here to study. I don't know how much money her parents spent, so she can't find a job, so she's going back. There's no point staying and struggling, and obviously influencing can't always make you that much. So yeah, she's disappointed, but she's not. It's not she hasn't tried, and so she has to go back to Nigeria because she just can't find a job.
And the job that Taiwo you're talking about, it normally is like something like care work.
Yeah.
And you've gone to university. You're someone where you come from. then why would you want to do care work if you can actually go back home and live a much better standard of life? And I feel that it's actually changing now, that people do not feel that they just, when you come, you're just trapped and you're not a failure. People actually, well, if I don't make it, people are now actually going back home and trying to make it back home rather than stay.
Excuse me, but care work is not supposed to be rubbish work.
I know.
And
I know.
And if you train, I mean, if you just go and do it and then you're just working at that basic level, you're never going to make any money. But for somebody like me, who isn't going to be a big person in any field in this world, because I wasn't brought up in a family with lots and lots of money, I managed to progress in care work. And if you want to take that as a career, that it has possibilities. You're never going to become like a lawyer or a doctor or something. You see, this is the thing. If you come from a family you expect to be so important, you shouldn't come here, because most people here are not important. I'm not important. My family have never been important. They won't be. Even if they get university degrees, unless you really, really want to be and you're going to fight and struggle and, become into JP Morgan or whatever it is. If that's the lifestyle you want, I don't think you should come here.
Yeah, I feel like people don't realise that though, Katrina. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. And of course, you only learn that with experience, don't you? But if you're willing to go back, and I think you're right, Jackie, I think people are more likely to go back now, whereas before they were more trapped when they came here. A nephew of mine was desperate to come here, and I was never wanting to encourage it because I was afraid. I've seen so many people I know who I've worked with who are here, and they think they're coming and they're going to make some money and then go back home. And it's years and years and years and probably never, because by then they've got married and houses and all the rest of it. I didn't want to encourage him because of that, but actually he did come. He stayed with me for a while. He worked like the girl in that story, Puna. He worked very, very hard. Now he's back in Zimbabwe, and he's doing okay. Whether he's doing better than he would have done anyway, I don't know, because he works very, very hard still. My relatives are, I think, unusual, really, in the sense that my husband, who got here, and he came from a very much poorer background than the majority of people you meet who come here. He got sponsored by British Council and various things, but his family are actually, when I first knew them, very, very ordinary, mostly rural people. Now they're not. They're mostly living in town, but a lot of them are still not at all well off. Whereas most people you meet here, they actually are from a slightly better off background back home, I think. So probably that affects how you like it or don't like it.
Sometimes
It's
it can be
choice.
good for, no, just saying, sometimes it can be good for people to come just to experience it and get it out of their system.
Yeah.
I agree, and I always encourage people to do so. Just come for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And talking about coming and coming into the country, I'll finish off with the last question. What is the most outrageous thing that's happened to you or that you've witnessed at an airport? I'll start. I've had my hair patted. I've had my suitcase turned inside out. No idea what they were looking for. And yeah, so my experience of airports is I normally always be one of those people that's pulled out for extra checks.
I've never had any major problems. I mean, I generally go through the green channel because I don't have anything to declare. I think I've been pulled aside out of the green channel once and asked questions. Oh no, I've just remembered. This is when I was coming back, the first time I was coming back to the United Kingdom as a 20-something-year-old, early 20s. And so I was kind of totally green. And the new passport that I'd recently got from the British Embassy in Lagos. And I remember being pulled aside and the woman was saying, "Have you got any drugs inside?" I was looking at her, I couldn't understand what she meant. And she said inside, and then it kind of clicked, have I got any drugs in my person, in my body? And I kind of just looked at her and I just smiled and I just said, no, I haven't. And now when I think about it, I just think, what kind of a stupid question is that? As if to say, if I did, I'm going to say, yeah.
Are you going to say yes? Yeah.
But I think, it's just casting my mind back. That's probably the most outrageous thing that's ever happened to me at an airport.
Annette, Katrina, you've had any stories?
Same like hair patting I've had, which I don't know if it's that, because it is what it is with that now. It doesn't mean it's right, but I'm just kind of used to it. So I wouldn't see that too much as outrageous. Obviously, I told you when I landed in Japan, and I knew why they pulled me out of the line, and they tipped my bag, literally pulled it apart, brought out a book and pointed at drugs. And then I basically had to do a "do you know who I am" thing, because at that point I was working at the Foreign Office. So I had to do that, even though I had no diplomatic passport, but it seemed to work. And I think this one was partly my fault, but still was ridiculous. When I went to Tanzania, I entered with my Ghanaian passport because I don't require a visa. But I think when I was checking in to leave or something, I think I said, anyway, I was trying to leave with my British passport. And then he was just trying to say that the computer was basically saying no, and I have to buy a visa. I was like, I'm not buying a visa for a country that I'm leaving. And we just went back and forth, trying to make me pay £50 for a visa. And I said, no, you shouldn't let me in the first place. Became a whole thing, tried to take me to an immigration room. And then thankfully, because I came with two friends, and they looked like they were looking over at what was going on. I kept saying, you're going to make them miss their flight because of what you're doing right now. And we're going to cause, I did my whole, to be very British about it. And I just said all the complaints I was going to do. And so eventually he let me go. And that's also because someone else was in an interrogation room, so it would have taken even longer. But I just thought, how ridiculous, you're going to make me buy a visa for a country I'm leaving. So yeah, that was my outrageous one.
That reminds me, when I was leaving Barbados, so we were leaving, and on the way to the airport, we just decided we just give away all the money that we had left to the hotel lady, because she'd been really nice and we were not going to need the money. And then when we got to the airport, we realized that we had to pay departure tax. And so we didn't have any money. And they said they didn't take any cards. So we were like, okay, so what are we going to do? We don't have money. You don't take cards. There's no cash machine to draw any money out. What do you want us to do? So in the end, they had mercy upon us and just let us through. But I didn't realize you had to pay departure tax.
What is departure tax?
A tax that you pay on departure, I guess.
I need to get out.
Well, for what? Where does it go?
To the government. I think there's some countries that charge departure tax. Yeah,
definitely Caribbean countries. Departure tax. Come across that,
which is a bit weird, because just charge people for when they're coming. So that was my other interesting airport story.
The only thing I could think of which was a little bit outrageous, and I'd forgotten all about it actually, but when I was in Ethiopia, my sons, how young were they? One was 14, I think, and the other was the other one would have been 11. As we came in, and you've got the different queues for going with your British passport, or whether you're getting siphoned off somewhere else. Some official came along and tried to take the boys to the other queue. I didn't actually have to say anything. I think I looked so furiously outraged that he backed off immediately, and I was, they're with me. But it just does show the stereotyping. Even my son, actually, it happened to him. He was on the aeroplane, nothing bad, but he was very annoyed because he was standing in the queue for the gents. Somebody spoke to him and asked him, this must have been on our way out, because obviously of their colouring, their sort of brown-skinned children. Oh, was he happy to be going home? And he was, I'm not Ethiopian. People make a lot of assumptions, don't they?
They do. And I think, on that making of assumptions, first of all, I would like to say to any listeners who are care workers, care work is one of those jobs that's required, especially given as we are aging. We are an aging population, and we need more care workers than we have. I didn't mean to belittle it. What I meant is that actually some people just, that's not their calling in life. That's not what they feel to be their calling, and they're just forced to do it out of necessity. That's what I meant. So coming back to the book, out of 5, how would you rate it, and would you recommend it?
I think I gave it a 4 previously, and I think I will stick with the 4. A strong 4. I would recommend it. Unlike Katrina, I do like short stories. It's my favorite format for reading, and I liked most of the stories. Unlike Annette and Jackie, the story that I didn't like was the doggy one. I really couldn't relate to it. Memoirs of a Namaso. And I didn't like Love Made in Manchester either, but I think maybe that's a generational thing. And I didn't like My Brother Wemage. But the rest, I particularly liked Christmas is Coming, the very first one, the prologue.
Yeah.
But I think that she really gets under the skin of different characters. So when it works, it really works well. So yeah, 4.
There's a lot of things I like about it. I didn't want to go to this 3.75 business, but I would certainly say it's 3.5 upwards rather than otherwise, because there is a lot I like about it. But actually, like you said, Jackie, I think her long books, well, the one I've read, I really enjoyed First Woman. That was one of my favorite books over the ones we've read. So yeah, it's got lots of good in it.
Annette?
I was going to say, well, the dog one, you can't relate to it because you're not a dog. I don't know if it's actually relatable. It's just from a different perspective. So if you could relate to it, I'd be worried. Anyway, so 4.5 for me. I enjoyed most of them. I think it was just the last one I didn't care for it too much. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, especially in short stories. If there are stories where they could go on for longer, because I don't always feel like that's the case. And there's some of them I thought, oh, it's too short. I really wanted to see where it progresses. So yeah, that's what I really enjoyed about it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's good, easy read.
I agree. It was a very easy read. And it's I was reading Murakami at the same time. And I just really struggled with the Murakami one compared to this. With this one, I'll just pick it up and then I'll just be completely immersed. Whereas the Murakami one's like, what's going on? You know, what am I reading? Why is this not going anywhere? So the contrast was very, very obvious reading this and reading that. And I really enjoyed this because of all the issues that we've talked about. It raises all those issues, and it actually does make you think about the migrant experience from lots of different perspectives. And yeah, I do agree that some of the stories were too long, but I think there's only a very few that I did not like. She's still a much better novel writer than she is a short story writer, in my view. But then I think she wrote this when she was doing her MFA or her PhD, so it's excusable. Maybe her next collection of short stories will be better. We'll wait and see. And then on that note, it just leaves me to say we shall be reading Dream Hotel later on this month. I hope you guys, if you've started it, are enjoying it. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much for sparing your evenings to have a chat about Manchester Happen. And see you next time when we discuss Dream Hotel.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And don't forget to share. Goodbye.